Sweet surrender as I love, serve, and remember.
You're sitting here. You're like the entire cosmos, and you're here online. The entire cosmos, right? The infinite, eternal nature of pure spirit that created billions and billions of galaxies and stars and every grass and blade of grass and grain of sand. It's all inside of each of you, that every one of you has within you the infinite cosmos. And yet you are this physical form here today. So you're basically a living miracle. And I just want to say how grateful I am to be with all these living miracles. Thank you. To share this moment in time and space. In January of 2005, I had a vision that told me that I was to learn integral theory. And it was very clear, nothing else, don't get distracted by anything else. This is what you need to be doing with your time. Now, integral theory, the main articulator of integral theory is Ken Wilber, and I'd already read 2 of his books, and for anyone who's read any of his books, they're very long. So I really had felt already complete. I didn't feel this need to read more, but when Spirit speaks to you, you follow it. So I gave everything, and amazingly and wonderfully, at that very time, there was a big integral community happening in Denver. This is where Ken Wilber lived, and it was happening in the Denver Boulder area, and it was very, very exciting. They had these DVDs of everything that they were doing there. So as an Integral Institute member, I got the DVDs as well as 2 CDs. And the CDs were Ken Wilber interviewing all sorts of people about integral theory. And then the meetings that were happening in Denver had all these people. He was very big on lineages, so he had the heads of lineages, like Father Thomas Keating, sort of the Christian, and Genpo Roshi in the Buddhist line, and had all these various teachers, and they're all in the same room and doing all these, talking about how integral theory works within their traditions and teaching their traditions, and it was very exciting. And then, and the idea of integral theory is it includes everything. So it was psychologists and business folks. There was integral business and integral politics, and the interviews that Ken Wilber had were with Al Gore and Rick Rubin, the music producer, and the guys who did The Matrix only would allow Ken Wilber to be the commentator on their movies because they based it on a lot of his work. I mean, so he's like everywhere. This is an exciting, dynamic time. On the top of one of Wilber's books, there's a quote from Deepak Chopra: read everything he has to say. So like all the big names are reading him, learning him, in the same space, talking about him, and I felt really excited to be a part of it, just even a little bit. And so just as a cute little story, some of you heard it, these DVDs and CDs that came to me every month, and I listened to them, watched the DVD on TV and listened to the CDs, and Julian's a little guy, and they named it Integral Naked, like out in the open, Integral Naked. So one time, Julian's just a little tyke, and we're going through Blockbuster. This is when Blockbuster still existed, and I'm looking for a movie. And Julian, in his little boy self, yells really loudly, "Hey, Mom, why don't you get one of those naked DVDs?" Oh my gosh, I was so embarrassed. I'm like, no. I don't really watch naked DVDs. They really should have come up with a better name. So it's a very exciting time, and I'm also learning how to integrate it with science of mind. And Ken Wilber, one thing the integral world, they like to be a little bit discerning or critique. So he was somewhat critical of New Thought. He was also critical of Deepak Chopra, but didn't bother Deepak at all, because anything that's true can handle criticism. And so it was exciting and interesting, and how to see what's true and what's not true, and all these people and all these different perspectives. And then the Integral Institute, for various reasons which are not applicable to today, sort of imploded. There's a lot of things that happened and this beautiful thing that had been created and people were very excited about. And they have an integral, in fact, they're just having an integral European conference in another month. So it's still going on, but the intensity with which everyone was participating stopped, just didn't continue. Mostly, I'll just say, because of bad behavior towards women, but unfortunately. And so I was part of that as well. And it was a very difficult time. So that's, after that imploded, and remember, I'd had a vision, so I'm doing this because I'm guided, but I've done everything. I was immersed, I've learned it, I've taught it to people, but it was like nothing mattered. And so I went into this dark night of the soul. And so much a part of that dark night of the soul is I have done so much. I have had so many different spiritual teachers. I've had so many different spiritual experiences. I've done therapy. I've done philosophy. I felt like I'd done so much and it all meant nothing. Like suddenly it was just like, so what? Just there was that energy. And that was the hardest place to be in, and it lasted for about 2 years. Because there was nothing, there was nothing new to excite me. I felt like I'd already had so much, and so there was just this emptiness. One of the things that I did, though, and I did this for several years, is I used to go to Starbucks at like 5 o'clock in the morning and do my journaling there before Julian was still in elementary school, and I wanted to get home before he woke up, so I'd be there early. And there was like this little group of us that were always there at our own little table. So there's Don. I don't know if any of you know Don. He hung out downtown Livermore a lot. He worked with the homeless. And he'd be studying his Bible, and we got to know the baristas, the Starbucks baristas, intimately, talking, but really staying to our own work. Don actually had a Bible study on Wednesdays. The owners of the ale house would come on Wednesdays and do Bible study with him. And it was just everybody I met. Like one of the baristas actually just met with Julian recently about going to college. These deep connections were happening at Starbucks. And I kept thinking, this is like church, this is the best. But this is all during my dark night of the soul, and I always do my spiritual practice, so I'm in there journaling, and one time, this is after a couple years of doing this, out of the blue, Don just walks over to me, and he plops the book, Practicing the Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. And he said, I just have the feeling you're going to like this book. And he walked away. Now, I knew Brother Lawrence because Reverend Michael had used him as a story, and the story he used was exactly what Gloria quoted today, which is Brother Lawrence worked in the kitchen in a monastery, and he was able to find this incredible peace of God, this presence of God, in the midst of the busyness of the kitchen. All these orders are going, people are yelling, and in the midst of that, he feels the same tranquility in the midst of that as he does on his prayer cushion or taking the sacrament. I always remembered that story. I even used it myself when I was giving talks, but I never actually read the book. Now, when I say a book, it's like really tiny, and even of that, the words of Brother Lawrence really take up about a quarter of that, and they just add on and flush it out to make it seem like a book. So it's not long. His words aren't long, but it's very impactful. And so I started reading it because I had nothing else to do, and I was pretty neutral reading it. And as I started reading it, this light gets reignited. It slowly starts growing as I'm reading it. I'm like, yes, this is it. This is everything. When all is said and done, it doesn't matter what the theologies are. It doesn't matter what experiences you've had or haven't had. What matters is that day-to-day practice of the presence of God. And it's utter humility. You're not trying to prove anything. You're just showing up and consciously becoming aware of this presence all of the time and returning to that practice over and over and over and over and over and over again. And that's all Brother Lawrence did. He had no big job in the Catholic Church. He didn't profess long theologies. He had no interest really in theologies. The only thing he had interest in practicing was the presence of God all the time. He committed himself to that when he entered into the monastery. He didn't really like the job they gave him in a kitchen. That's not really what he wanted to do, but that became the thing that he did. But what really his job was to know the presence of God and to practice it. And the energy that started surrounding him and his vibration, people started coming, leaders started coming and talking to him and asking his wisdom and asking his advice because they started to feel something. So when we practice the presence of God, we don't have to do it to prove anything. There's nothing to prove. If you're trying to prove something, then you're in the realm of the human, trying to get something or prove or to show who you are. But practicing the presence is a quiet thing, but if God, the presence, the power wants to use you, it will. And it will draw people to you. The other thing I didn't pick up when I first read it because I wasn't as conscious of Catholicism at that point. I've learned a lot more of the Catholic tradition. So what I didn't know is in Catholic tradition, I know many of you already knew this, is that there's a lot of formalized prayer. And so I didn't catch that he said it, but I just happened to reread this book, Practicing the Presence, a while ago, just recently, and he says he didn't really care about what the formalized prayers were. It didn't matter to him. He just said all that mattered is what came from my heart, moment to moment. There weren't any rules for him. It was just his love. He was just going to pour his love to the divine. And he said, I lived my life as if there's only God and me. That's all that exists, is God and me. So every person, every situation, in the midst of everything, is just God and me. Just God and me. And so whatever came from his heart, there weren't rules, there weren't the things to follow, the structure. It was just his heart. Practice. That was the greatest hope for me when I was reading that. After spending so many times learning all these different traditions, doing all this stuff in the theology and the thinking and this tradition and this tradition and blah, 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 suddenly it's just the simple practice. It's just the simple practice, and that's what we're here to do. Now, the way Brother Lawrence talks about it is he's practicing the presence, and he talks about it as a human being who is practicing the presence of the divine. There's the Eastern tradition where it's the opposite, where you practice more being the divine, witnessing the human. And that's what we see with mindfulness meditation, witnessing, vipassana, whatever words that work for you. And it's the idea that the divine I am is who we are. It's the, I'm not going to say his name, Desjardins, Teilhard Desjardins. You know, I was counting on you, Joni. It's where the spiritual being's having a human experience. And so the idea is that the great I am is who and what we are, and we identify as this witness, and we're witnessing as spiritual beings our human experience. And that's what mindfulness meditation is. So it's just an inverse. One is identifying as a human, acknowledging the divine, and the other one is acknowledging my self-identity as a divine, witnessing the human. Those are both practicing the presence just from a different perspective. And that witnessing is incredibly spacious and free, because you're not confined to a time and space and a history. You are now the infinite presence, and everything is possible to that infinite presence. It's incredibly empowering and freeing and clarifying. There's a reason why mindfulness meditation is taken off, because this presence is always here. And it just gives, with a few practices and techniques, you can start tapping into it fairly easily, because it's always been who you are, always. And then there's the nuances. And I thought about this recently because I have a friend from high school who's really given herself to the non-dual meditation. And witnessing and non-dual are very subtle, those differences, so I won't get into that. But even the mindfulness meditation, she had her meditation practices, and then her husband was a non-dualist meditation teacher and lived it. She would tell these stories that were extraordinary, and then he transitioned to another dimension, and then she's gone back to her other way of doing. All of it is mindfulness meditation, but there's like these little tweaks. So the question is does it matter? And it doesn't matter. You can get into the theological discussions, well, I do it this way because of that way or that. It doesn't matter. Every one of us starts to know what resonates with us. So all those all years I was doing these different practices and different teachers, regardless of who the teacher is or what the practice I was doing, I was practicing the presence. Every time you're doing any type of spiritual work, doing a prayer treatment, a prayer, a meditation, anything, you're practicing the presence. Having a conversation and you're calling forth, oh, the presence of God is right here, the one power, you're practicing the presence. So we can try all these different things, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have these new experiences because it's like experiencing spirit from all these different perspectives, but all of them are practicing the presence. So again, it gets us out of there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. There's no there's no intermediary. There's no intermediary between you and the divine. It's direct and it's immediate and it's now. It's direct, it's immediate, and it's now. No teacher, no teaching, anything can come in between you and your personal experience of the divine. And so we are here to practice this presence individually as in a way that aligns with us, and that might change. We don't always know what that is, and so we try different things. But we find our way to practice this presence. The one thing it's not, and this also came up this past week, being a spiritual being is not just being a really, really good human being. You can be a really, really good person and give a lot and be kind to everybody, but that's not what spirituality is. Spirituality is like a different dimension. And I was reminded of this because I decided to, this past Monday, I went to a Bible study of the church in which I was raised. I was just curious to see what it would be like. And they gave us a little passage, and I didn't really have much thoughts about it, so I went to the group. It's on Zoom, obviously, because they're in Cleveland. And it was a liberal Protestant group, and so it was just, I'm like, oh yeah, this is so them. So they're looking at it, and they're looking at it from this way, or it could mean this, and it could mean this, and they're like, oh, I love that there's no answer. It's really it's a constant open to questioning and allowing us to explore. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is all the way I was raised. That's great. And it was good. I love all of it. I love the openness and the freedom to look at things from multiple different ways. And then the minister asked, so what does that one line, my kingdom is not of this world, mean to you? And then they gave different perspectives. And they were fine, but I just sort of, I didn't say anything the whole time, but I just sort of raised my hand now and I said, well, I also think my kingdom of not of this world is saying that it's a consciousness that we're not normally, like it's beyond what this world is. And our job is to shift into an expanded state of consciousness. And the minister said, okay, well, if there's nothing else, we're going to close up our group. Like, oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah. that you can have all these wonderful ideas and look at things from different perspectives and really do all this human stuff. Sri Aurobindo said, our job isn't just about becoming really superhuman beings. It's about spiritual beings, which is a different state of consciousness, which is why we need to practice it every single day, because we are surrounded by human consciousness. We have lived in human consciousness. Our families are human consciousness. Our community, our world, the news, everything that we hear is human consciousness. The only way we can practice spiritual consciousness is to constantly make these shifts every day, and no one's going to ask you to do it. No one's going to come up and say, are you doing that right now? Are you holding you say there's only one power and presence. Are you practicing that? No one's going to do that. That's up for us. And no one should do that, because it's no one's business but your own. But that's what we're here to do. We are here to practice something that is not of this world, that is not our normal state. It's not just about being kind or good or having multiple perspectives. It's about a whole nother state of consciousness, and to become that, we need to practice it. We need to practice it every day, day in and day out, in the midst of our jobs, as well as when we're doing our spiritual practices. That's where the freedom comes. And when we're connecting with that eternal presence, to remember that this presence isn't just about this time. When they say be present, it's not just about being present here and now in this moment in time and space, because that's still temporal, right? That's not what they're talking about. The eternal now includes all the past, all the future, the infinite presence of pure spirit. So when we are connecting and practicing the presence in this moment, to recognize that this moment is eternal. This moment is eternal, and this moment is infinite. So when we're practicing the presence throughout our day, we're practicing the eternal and infinite consciousness that transcends everything that we could ever humanly know. There is a great humility to it. And I think that's what I really picked up when I read Brother Lawrence. He was just so humble. And I know that's a big part of the tradition, but it was new to me. We talk a lot about knowing things, but there's a level of humility. I am connecting with the infinite and eternal. I can't contain that with my human rational mind. It's so much bigger than that. It's also the place where the healing happens. Healing happens through this infinite and eternal place. We can do a lot of healing on the human realm. But the place where the true and biggest and greatest healing happens is through pure spirit. And we know when that spirit has touched us because we have this phrase, which I love. It dissolves into the nothingness from which it came. It dissolves from nothingness. There's nothing in principle, in truth, that can support our pain and our suffering, because the purity of love, the purity of wholeness, the purity of health is our absolute nature. And that is more powerful than anything humanly. And so what was interesting, I've been talking about looking at the trauma work, and so much of it over and over is mindfulness, mindfulness, mindfulness. And what they're saying is practicing the presence, practicing the presence, practicing the presence. See the power in the presence in the midst of the pain. Some of the greatest healings that people have shared with me have come from a spiritual moment, and then it's just gone. Now, sometimes it happens instantly, and sometimes it takes time. I remember Reverend Michael telling a story once where he was just feeling this. He practices mindfulness. I would say he practices and lives mindfulness. And he said he just kept coming, this pain, this sadness was the word he used, the sadness between he and his father just coming up. And he didn't feel like there was anything to do about it. It was just a sadness. And he witnessed it, and he would look at it, and he didn't do anything about it. And then it would go away, and then it would come back, and then it would go away. And he said this went on for like 2 years, until finally it just dissolved into the nothingness from which it came, and it was healed. And he knew the moment when it was done. And he didn't do anything other than practice the presence in the midst of the sadness, without having to know the sadness, without having to fix the sadness, practicing the presence. Reverend Mark Anthony Lord came here in, I think, 2016. He gave us an incredible talk on forgiveness. He believes so strongly in the power and the presence of spirit. Do you remember it, Sharon? Do you remember that talk, Sharon, Gloria? That was an incredible talk. And he talked about his own abuse as a child. And then his experience, a spiritual experience. He was in a spiritual community. I believe he was in India at the time. And he tells the whole story, so I don't know, I'm not going to tell the whole story, but the conclusion is this incredible light just infused him, and everything was forgiven and healing. Nothing was there, and he's been free ever since. And so much of his ministry is about people finding their freedom and really knowing that this presence is powerful. As Reverend Nirvana used to say, one in God is a majority. One in the presence is a majority. And so it's not, sometimes it takes years and years, and sometimes it happens in a moment, although things never happen in a moment. It's all the work you've done up until that moment. But it's a place of extraordinary healing for ourselves individually and for the world, and it's a place of freedom and creativity, of joy. You will start discovering things that you never knew possible. It's funny because Brother Lawrence is, there's definitely a Catholic theology in his book, and it's funny because part of the Catholic theology is, I'm not worthy. And he just, as you could tell, he just doesn't know what to do with all the good that's happening to him. I know I'm not worthy, but all these good things happen to me, and I feel terrible that all these good things are happening to me. It's like he can't wrap his head around it. Like when you practice the presence, good things happen, wonderful, loving, joyful things, and every one of us are the recipient of it. And the only thing that we have to do, the simple but not easy thing, is to practice the presence. So we're talking about this, this afternoon, or right after service, we have our annual meeting. And so I was thinking about, what is my vision for the Lighthouse? First of all, let's let go of my. What is the vision? What is the divine vision for the Lighthouse? And for the way I understand it, is that we are a community that is absolutely committed to practicing the presence. That the individuals in this community are, whatever way that looks for and it can change and forward, but it's gonna, so it's a huge journey. So we are practicing the presence in whatever way that works for us. We are practicing every day. There's that commitment to know that there's a divine, eternal, and infinite reality of beauty, of harmony, of joy, of love, of healing, of grace, of light that is everywhere present, and we are connecting with it on a constant and eternal basis. And that whatever we are doing as a community, I saw Chit somewhere, there you are. Chit went with a few people on a hike with some members of our community on a hike on Saturday. Whether we're here cleaning property, whether you're in classes, whether you're in a meditation group, whether you're here on Sunday service, no matter what we are doing as a community, we are practicing the presence. That as members of this community, we bring that consciousness of the presence in everything that we do, and all the activities. Yeah, right, Jerry? That's right. Right. Everything we do, we practice the presence. And that's how we become a lighthouse to the world. We already are, and we continue to grow because ultimately everything that we do, our classes, our activities that are for fun and to get work done, and all the various things that we do, everything, our financial life, everything that we do is practicing the presence. And that's how we know the kingdom of heaven on earth. You with me on that? You up for that vision? To live it, to be it? We'll support each other, yeah? Let's all just support each other and live in this. Let's pray. And it's so great when we are practicing the presence, as Brother Lawrence so aptly said, that there's not much difference between what's happening regularly and our prayer life. So it's not a big shift. We're already there. We're already living in this powerful love, this eternal light, this infinite knowingness. That includes all creation. That includes all creation from the beginning of time to the end of time. That includes all space, all time, all dimensions of time and space and beyond. That is what is here in this room right now. That is here online, in your rooms, wherever you are online. That is what's here. That's the miracle of what's here right now. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to change a thing about ourselves. It's already here. It's already here. All that love that has ever been, it's already here. All the healing that we long for, that possibility is in every moment. As we turn our attention over and over to this loving, gentle, tender, kind, infinitely wise, infinitely powerful, infinitely beautiful, infinitely loving presence. It is peace that passes all human understanding. It's here. That which we are calling forth from the depths of our being, it's here. It's here. It's now. And how grateful I am to know that it is every one of us. That we are this vehicle of light. We are this vehicle of presence. We are this vehicle of eternity and infinity. We are that place here and now. And we open our heart and we see that everywhere we look. So whether we are it or just we see it as the divine and I are all that I see, it is total immersion in God consciousness and divine consciousness, total immersion. What a great place to be. Why would I want to be any place else but in this divine, infinite, loving intelligence? Here, now, and forever. How grateful I am to know this about every person in this community and in the entire world. This presence is. All we see is God. All we feel is God. And it is in this God consciousness we once again bless our beautiful Pat Coker as she's made her transition from one dimension in this presence to another dimension in this presence. But yet we are still with her in this presence. And we embrace all those who love Pat. We embrace Jim and his beautiful, tender heart. He is with us and we are with him. And we walk with him and all those who love Pat. And we walk with each other through all of life's experience. This presence and this power walks with all of us, as us, through all of life's experiences. Those that heal and those that reveal. And so I just ask you to take a moment in this presence and to call forth anything in your life that you are willing to let be healed in this moment. Just you can say it out loud or in your mind. Just call forth that which you are willing to allow this presence, to give over to this presence and allow it to heal. And as you're doing this for yourself, if there's people that you know who need a healing, call forth their names. How grateful I am for these calling forth and opening and opening and opening to this infinite tenderness and this infinite wholeness and this infinite good and this infinite love of pure spirit that is always already completely being itself as answered prayer, here, now, and forever. And for this Lighthouse community and for all those who are here actively engaged in the Lighthouse community, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Divine Infinite One. Thank you. Thank you. We say yes. We say yes to being the presence and loving the presence and giving our heart. What a beautiful community. What a beautiful light. In deep abiding gratitude, we let this be now. We let this prayer be, knowing that as this prayer has been seen, known, and felt, it is fulfilled here and now. And I invite you now to join me in saying, and so it is.
I walk in God in all I do. I walk in God in all that I say.